Ultimately, if you're less in calorie intake, you will lose weight. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. This is Dr. Ben Leland here in Winter Park, Florida. Today, I'm discussing the CICO method nuances for weight loss. On my previous video, I discussed how to calculate your basal metabolic rate and your total daily expenditures, and how to match that or be deficit in calorie intake using an app and monitoring your calories. But there are nuances to the CICO method, and I think there's just too much things out there on the internet that confuses people. So making this video to help clarify what all the battles are regarding the diet and regarding different types of diets, and about how really weight loss is going to happen, how sustainable weight loss is going to happen. And most people have been going about it all wrong and causing so much confusion. It's not going to matter. If your calories are deficit, you will lose weight. I believe the nuances that people are arguing over is if you have metabolic dysfunctions or diabetes and higher insulin levels and insulin resistance, these problems are going to play a factor in losing weight. But for the general population where people may not have these issues, then they're really fighting over the nuances of that. But what's really going to be important is your calories deficit. When we're talking about CICO, these nuances to discuss are the ones that I'll bring up today. The first one is that food has a thermic effect. So what does that mean? They call this the TEF, the thermic effect of food. One argument for carnivores why they lose weight or a high protein diet is because they may eat a bunch of protein, but the energy needed to burn these foods is pretty high. It's upwards towards 30%. So for example, if I eat 1,000 calories of protein, it takes 30% of energy of that food to actually burn it through my metabolism. So you could say you have a higher metabolism, but it's really just your metabolism to burn this food. And this is where they're having overall net deficit in calories, because if I'm taking in 1,000 calories of pure protein or meat, then I'm really only taking in 700 calories in that meal. And for example, if I had 3,000 calories of protein, then you multiply that times 30%, the net calorie balance is going to be around 2,100 calories of intake per day, because it takes energy to break down the proteins. They call this the thermic effect of food. So understanding this, you're going to know that when you're counting your calories, that's an extra benefit for weight loss if you're increasing your protein intake. The next is the other types of foods that have a milder thermic effect, somewhere towards 20 to 15 to 20%, are the whole foods. This is why we want to eat higher protein, whole food diet when we're trying to lose weight. We're not trying to eat processed foods. That has the lowest thermic effect. Don't do it. You know, if we're going to have this once in a while on occasion, it's probably fine. But in general, this is where the battleground happens with processed foods. You just tend to eat more of them, and they have a low thermic effect. You tend to have more calories intake. So that's the first part. The second part is that your metabolism does adjust to what's going on. And if you're lowering your calorie intake, your body's going to want to conserve. They call this the metabolic adaptation. So metabolic adaptation is more aggressive the more progressive you are with calorie restricting. This is why we try to recommend trying to stay around 300 to 500 calorie deficit in the intake of food, or total net deficit in a day of 300 to 500 calories, which is equivalent to about a pound a week. Imagine a full pound of fat. You can burn that in a week and it stays off. So our metabolism does adjust, but if you're staying around 500, it's going to be very minimal, 5–10%. And so don't focus on that. Try to be more active, change your food, fight it in different ways by adjusting your foods. You're going to have to go through this regardless if you're losing weight in one way or the other, but this is the best way to go about it. 100% is to do it to 300–500 calorie deficit per day. and adjusting their food, like I previously mentioned. The other battleground where this happens is where we're talking about the hormones involved. And yes, they have some impact, and ultimately people will try to change their diet to affect the hormones. But what's really happening is you're eating overall less calorie intake. Now, the hormones can probably have some effect on hunger, but ultimately, if you're less in calorie intake, you will lose weight. And so if you're thinking too much about the hormones involved, you're thinking about the wrong thing. It's really about whole foods, higher protein intake, calorie deficit in a consistent manner. So if you're trying to eat low carb, it's very hard. For most people I've found as my patients, it's not sustainable. It's best if you just don't do that. Maybe if you're going to be doing that, it's for a shorter period, but focusing on the things I mentioned is probably going to be more beneficial for you. So these hormones like insulin, ghrelin, GLP, there are ways to adjust these, and you're going to be doing that on the previous methods that I'm talking about. But focusing on one of them is going to make it very restrictive on your food. It's going to tend to make you rebound on your weight. So understand these do exist and they do have some factor, but it's going to be not as huge of a factor as the other things I mentioned. The other part is going to affect these hormones. Ultimately, is going to be how sleep is, how stress is. So you're going to want to have your stress and sleep in order. You have to have 7-9 hours of sleep. There are relaxation methods that you have to go through and reduce your stress. Now, here's the other part. When you're losing weight, when you're restricting, if you do it the wrong way, not all weight loss is going to be fat. And so you're going to have some muscle loss. This is why we have to go beyond just a regular intake. We're going to want to have around 100 grams of protein per day. Now, when we are more on towards trying to prevent muscle wasting or sarcopenia or the loss of muscle when you're losing weight, you're going to go towards 1.6 to 2 grams per kilogram of weight. And so we're going to tend to be around 150 to 100 grams of protein per day when you're trying to not lose muscle. The other part of this is the timing of your meal. So the timing of your meal has some impact. And again, these are nuances to the calorie in and calorie out, but you can have a little bit better metabolism if you're not eating at night. There are hormone changes and relaxation and social issues that happens at night where you tend to have a little bit slower metabolism and slower digestion, and then higher metabolism with your circadian rhythm if you're eating towards the earlier part of the day or lunchtime. These things will affect insulin sensitivity, but these are very marginal. And again, I don't want you to focus on them, but we tend to eat with a general pattern of more towards the earlier part of the day than at nighttime. So what does it really boil down to when everybody is discussing different types of diet, insulin sensitivity? For the most part, if you're generally just trying to lose weight, you're going to lose weight if you're calorie deficit. You can see my other video where I calculate how to get to your basal metabolic rate and your total daily expenditures. I'll put a link of that in the description below. And then you can be able to calculate your calories and then not really focusing on the nuances of this. Tend to be 300 to 500 calorie deficit per day. Eat whole foods, higher protein intake, resistance training, and just be more active. This is how I do it in the office with all my patients. This is how these things work. So follow these things and you'll lose weight. I hope you liked this video. If you did, if it was a benefit for you, like, subscribe, share it with others, and see you on the next one. Thank you.